Hello and welcome to Sustainability Matters.
Hello, everyone. Good day and welcome to another episode on Sustainability Matters. As always, I'm your host, Agatha Afemike, and today we have a very, very interesting guest with us in the person of Nina Benoit. I hope I got that correctly. Nina is the Director of Sustainability at Brightest, a software company designing solutions around sustainability reporting for businesses globally. She brings extensive experience from her role at Montblanc, where she led impactful environment and social initiatives across different markets. It's my pleasure to welcome her on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us, Nina.
Thank you, Agatha. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm especially thankful because we've had a lot of challenges trying to get here, and you've been very patient with us on the way. So thank you so much.
Of
Um,
course, no problem.
it's a Tuesday morning. How are you doing? How's your day coming?
Very good. I just did some yoga and meditation this morning, so
Right.
feeling very peaceful and ready to start a productive day.
I love that. I love that. I also love the fact that you don't play with your weekends. I remember trying to schedule this meeting for a weekend and you're like, I want to rest. Please, I love that really. Because I'm also trying to learn work-life balance and it's been difficult for me. Every day is a work day, so it's I need to learn it. Thank you for setting such a good example. Okay, so we're getting into the topic we have for today around regulations, especially the evolving regulatory landscape in Europe. But I want to start with you first of all. Can you walk us through your career journey starting up in sustainability, especially where you picked up the interest from?
Mhm. So, my interest in sustainability really stems from my family, actually. My
Mhm.
mom, I think, played a very big impact in this
Yeah.
interest I developed over time. I remember when I was a kid, she would always go to the local market. She would always emphasize the
Mm.
relevance of recycling, not using too
Mm.
much water, turning off the lights. So I think these little things
Right.
that she taught me really had a profound impact on me and my career. But I think it's really during my education, actually, that I really understood why this was so relevant. And
Mm.
I remember I think, in my first year of university in the Netherlands, and we had this teacher teach us what was our carbon footprint in terms of how many planets would people need if everybody lived like us.
Wow.
And at the time, I was actually vegan, so I was already quite aware of my impact, and it was already a bit lower. But the result was something like 5 planets for
Wow.
everybody to live like me.
That's
And
crazy.
I thought, yeah, it's not possible. It's just the way we live is just, especially in countries in Europe or in the US, where people, may consume a lot. Well, it could be anywhere really. It really is an issue. The lifestyle that we're having, the traveling, the number of electronics you own. It's
Mm.
everything just adds up, and if everybody lives like this, is just not possible. So that really, yeah. Made me think a lot and question my behavior and try to think, okay, what can I do? And I think really the more I learned about it, the more I understood that there was a big issue and that as the population is growing, you
Yeah.
can't keep on going that way. That's just not possible.
Right. Mm. I love that. I love that so much, because that story just tells me that you're grounded and you've seen sustainability being played out in real life. Unlike me, I need to take that test actually to see what my footprint looks like. But talk to me about your career so far. You've spoken to us about how you got into sustainability, that's how you built an interest in sustainability. But how did you get into doing it as a career, if you get what I mean?
Okay. So actually, my first experience in sustainability was with my first startup. So I founded a startup while I was still at university, actually.
Mhm.
And as I was deciding on multiple elements about this startup, we were deciding it was a food catering business that I had with the 2 other partners. And we were deciding what type of boxes to use to deliver the food. what kind of t-shirts would the deliver person wear, all these elements, what kind of food we would have. And I was very much pushing for, cardboard, recycled boxes, FSC paper, recycled cotton t-shirts, and vegan food as well. So at the time, my role was not maybe sustainability manager, but I was already really pushing very strongly for it, and I was giving my partners a hard time because the costs were maybe a bit higher. But for
I
me, it was
know.
really
I know.
yeah
Yeah.
not a question. I couldn't agree with anything less than that, because I thought, okay, if I'm creating a business and I get
Mm-hmm.
to decide what kind of material and how I'm going to run my business, I want to make sure it will be very sustainable. So that was not a question for me.
Love that. Okay, so from on there, how did you get into Brightest? I want you to walk me through that journey, especially because the demography of people who follow this show are between the ages of 24 and 35. So these are all young people trying to get into sustainability in one way or the other. So walk me through how your journey through Mont Blanc into Brightest and even growing up the ladder to becoming director of sustainability at Brightest.
Of course. Um, so maybe I can tell you a bit about my previous role. I was working, as you
Okay.
mentioned, for Mont Blanc before as a sustainability manager.
Mhm.
And I was working there. I met with the co-founder of my current startup, Brightest, Chris, with whom we had a great conversation about the business, how it was
Mhm.
going. And he was very much looking for someone who could help him grow the business inside of Europe. And this is why we started working together. And he really needed somebody with expertise in Europe, but also somebody who could understand how does a sustainability manager think, what are the pain points, what does somebody need, as I would have been the ideal customer for the software. So really understanding, okay, what are the day-to-day struggles that you face working for a large company as a sustainability manager, having to write sustainability reports, improve your impact. So that's something that
Mhm.
he really liked. And then we started working together about a year ago, and it's been a fantastic journey. A lot has happened. Our team in Europe has significantly grown. So definitely very
Yeah.
exciting to see how a lot more companies are now pushing sustainability to the forefront of their agenda. So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
definitely a very exciting moment right now.
I love that. I love that. That's exciting. Okay, so we've spoken a lot and mentioned reference to Brightest a lot. Can you give us some insight into the core problems that Brightest is trying to address, especially around sustainability reporting?
So the core problem we're trying to solve is very much the lack of time that
Mm-hmm.
sustainability teams are facing. Unfortunately, sustainability teams are very often understaffed, so there is not
Mm-hmm.
enough people working on it because it's not the top priority for a lot of companies. You will have a lot more resources for finance maybe, or for sales, but sustainability is a bit the, the little duck, the black duck at the end. So it can be really tricky for sustainability teams to manage all the tasks that they have to deal with. And what's especially challenging is that for companies that are operating in Europe, they are so many regulations right now that they have to comply with, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to keep up and create all these reports. Depending
Mm-hmm.
on, for instance, if you're in Germany or you're in France or in the UK as well, and especially if you're an international company, then you have laws in Canada, in the US, a bit everywhere, really.
Right.
So it's really a struggle for these people to manage to do all of it and to track KPIs, create a sustainability report, but also communicate about it, improve their impact. There's really so much for them to do, and it's really difficult to do all of that without a tool, right? I think often
Right.
case people use Excel sheets to collect data, to create sustainability reports, but it's a lot of back and forth. The data collection is very painful, very difficult. So yeah, this is the kind of challenges I faced and that a lot of sustainability teams are facing right now.
Awesome. Awesome. And it's really great that a solution like Brightest is coming on board to make things easier for organizations trying to comply. I love that. So, what are the most significant regulatory changes currently happening in Europe right now? Just keep us abreast.
Yeah, of course. The European Commission has been working very hard, to
Mhm.
say the least. I think they really deserve a round of applause
Right.
because they have launched so many regulations last year and this year. So they're really working hard on making an impact, both on the social but also on the environmental side.
Right.
Definitely impressive, and it has gone at a speed that has never been seen before,
Right.
especially in terms of the requirements, the mandatory requirements for companies. I think it's really something that is completely new. And so I would say the number one regulation that is impacting a lot of companies is the CSRD, so the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive.
Right.
And so this regulation and essentially mandates companies to report on their ESG performance. So it's really the whole spectrum of, so not just carbon or just social, but really everything.
Right.
And that's why it's also a very tricky law, because there's so many data points that companies have to collect, which, and in many cases, actually, the companies maybe never collected this information before. They never did carbon accounting. They never collected any ESG data, or maybe a little bit, but not anything close to what they're asked to do right now.
Right.
So I would say this is one of the top regulation that is really our core focus. And what is very special about this regulation is that you also need to do an assessment to understand what are the topics that are relevant to your company. And so this assessment is called a double materiality assessment. And so you need to basically, you can do it yourself. Most of the time, companies work with consultants. And so they need to do an analysis to understand how do their companies impact their environment and their stakeholders, and how does it financially impact them. Based on that, they essentially create a matrix, and they're able to decide what are the parts of this law that they need to report on. And so imagine the amount of work that needs to be put into
Right.
that, doing this assessment, which takes
Right.
a couple weeks up to several months, depending on the size, a lot of resources, and then creating the report, which is also a tremendous amount of work.
I can imagine that. I can imagine that. Okay, so what are some of the technological advantages that Brightest brings to the table, especially in helping these organizations stay at par with this changing and evolving, and like you said, many branches of regulatory requirements?
Mm-hmm. So I think what is really great about Brightest, and I can say that also from my perspective as a former sustainability manager, it's very hard to keep up with the different laws, and it's also very difficult to read them. In all honesty,
I
it's
agree.
very complex. The way it's written, it's and not so easy to understand, of course. What do you need to do exactly? I've gone through the CSRD. regulation, you don't want to read it. It's
Yeah.
definitely yeah very difficult to understand. And so what we do is that we really summarize this law into different questions. So you
Oh,
have
I
a
love that.
questionnaire that is way easier to understand. We also split it into different sections. So you would have one on climate change, one on biodiversity, one on human
Mm-hmm.
rights, so that you can pick what section you're working on. And then you have the specific questions that are being asked in this law, which is not so clear when you actually read the regulation.
Right.
So we really try to simplify so that you understand what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also pick basically, so you can, I think we have about 20 different or even more standards on the platform right now. So you
Mm.
can say, okay, I need to create a report for the CSRD, but I also need to create a report for the GRI or for
Right.
ISS.
Oh.
And so you can have all of it into one platform, but you can also map the information.
Mm.
So, for instance, if you have, for instance, let's say in a CDP report, you may have
Mm.
the same question that is being asked than in the CSRD report, right?
Right.
And so, what we're able to do is to map these answers that, or these questions that are the same, for to save time, so you don't have to write the same things again and again
And
in
again.
different
Right. I love that. I love that. Well done to you and your team. So, in your opinion, what would you say is the adoption level, especially in the face of this many regulatory requirements that organizations should keep up with? Do you agree that there's a challenge in keeping up with it? If yes, what's the adoption rate so far?
It's definitely a challenge to keep up with it, and it's hard to assess right now. Adoption rate, you mean like how, if companies are complying,
Compliance,
right?
yeah, right.
It's hard to assess right now. I can imagine that some companies will not comply because
Mm.
they're not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not aware as well. I think that's also possible, because if there is no sustainability manager in the team, maybe the compliance team doesn't have it under their radar, I think it's possible that some companies might miss it as
Mm.
well. The European Commission has said, so speaking specifically about this one law, the CSRD, they will be more tolerant the first year, also with the quality of the reports, because they know it's very new and
Right.
companies don't know how to do it yet. Um, but I definitely think a lot of companies are not prepared and do not realize yet the amount of work that has to be put into it. And we're talking about thousands of companies, and
Yeah.
every year, so there is a certain threshold for which
Mm.
companies have to report based on their revenue, and every year it's going down.
Wow.
So it's gonna be almost every company at some point,
Right.
and also international companies that
Mm.
are operating in Europe.
Mm.
So really, the everybody is gonna do it at some point, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of companies are not even aware of it yet.
Mm. Interesting. What would you say currently? Are there sanctions for non-compliance, especially with some of the regulatory laws that you've mentioned earlier, the CSRD and the rest? Are there consequences for non-compliance, or is it voluntary reporting for now?
So right now, it's up to every country in the European Union to decide how do they want to deal with non-compliance.
Mm-hmm.
So far, the only one I saw was France,
Okay.
and here you can actually have very high penalties,
Mm-hmm.
and the managing director can also go to prison for
Excuse me.
non-compliance. So yes.
Wow.
So they are taking it very seriously in
Seriously, I see
France.
that.
I don't know. I don't know how they will do it in other countries. It's still up to discussion, but right now this is the highest penalty I've seen, which is not something that you want to, yeah, you want to go through in France. Yeah,
Mm.
for sure.
Interesting. Okay. So, how do you, in your own opinion as well, how do you anticipate the regulatory landscape will continue to evolve in the next 5 years? What are you expecting to see, in your opinion, as Nina Benoit, Director of Sustainability at Brightest?
Mhm. So I think that now there has been really a lot of new regulations. I just mentioned one, but there is a lot more that came out this year and last year. I think it will continue, but there was an election this year as well in Europe for the
Mm-hmm.
European Parliament. That so there is still quite a lot of green seats,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that it may slow down a little bit
Mm-hmm.
potentially because of also the amount of regulations that were already passed this year and last year.
Yeah.
So I think it slowed down a little bit, but still to achieve the goals that Europe has and the Paris Agreement, also the national goals. I do think that especially the countries will have more and more regulations. For instance, in the UK, in
Mm-hmm.
France, in Germany, we can see also some in Italy. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that because the governments are being pressured to
Right.
take action, like at the COP28, for instance, they also made several agreements. So I can imagine that there will be more national regulations as well
Mm.
in order for the countries to achieve their national goals.
Right, right. That all sounds to me like more burdens for the companies that are required to comply. In your opinion, do you think these regulations that we currently have, especially in the Europes, are already enough? Would you say let the companies breathe and be able to comply with what's already on ground as opposed to more regulations?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's tricky because I do think that these regulations can also put companies in financial difficulty in a sense because you
Hmm.
do have to invest. I've seen really crazy numbers
Hmm.
for the cost, for instance, of doing a double maturity analysis, which is this
Yeah.
analysis you need to do for the CSRD, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that for some companies it will be hard if you're already a bit of a financial difficulty to also comply because this will be additional cost for you, right?
Hmm.
In the short term, at least. In the long term, of course, this is good for investors. This is good for your clients. There's multiple benefits to it, but in the short term, I think it can be tricky for some companies, and I do think that some consolidation would be good to
Right.
avoid having companies need to report for multiple different standards,
Mm.
especially if the regulations are different
Right.
between the country. For instance, Germany and Europe, or if you have an office in the US and in Europe, and you have regulations that are completely different.
Hmm.
So I do think that trying to consolidate, like ISSB is trying to do,
Hmm.
would make complete sense so that you have less work for the company and they can
Hmm.
focus more on
Core
improving their
business.
impact instead of,
Hmm.
yeah, doing 50 different reports, which
I
takes
agree.
so much time.
I agree. I agree. And over here in Nigeria, what with because I'm a sustainability consultant myself, we're really
Mm-hmm.
thankful for the IFRS consolidating most of this regulatory requirements. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to agree on the fact that aside from the IFRS, the GRI, there's so many local regulations that organizations have to keep up with. And if you're not careful, it can become burdensome, especially when there are sanctions for non-compliance. But yeah, I agree with everything you've said so far. What advice would you give to young people? Like I mentioned earlier, the demography of people who follow this show are young professionals, either already in the sustainability space or trying to pivot into sustainability. What advice would you give to a young person, a young lady, a man, on building a career in sustainability?
Mm-hmm.
A successful career
So
like you
I
have,
think
really.
So I think that it's a very good time to start working in sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of opportunities, especially in
Absolutely.
compliance, of course. And also, I think it's great to see how much of education you can get. I think if you look back 10, 20 years ago, there was not half as many sustainability courses. I think now
100%.
a lot of major business schools, universities have sustainability degrees,
Mm-hmm.
um, also online degrees that you can do for free. So I think that that's definitely a great opportunity if you have the means to do it, to go to
Mm-hmm.
university, study, but also do online courses for free if you're working, or maybe if you cannot afford going to certain university. I think that there's so many resources online that you can have access to for free.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I think this is the first step, understanding what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
educating yourself to understand, okay, what are the key challenges? What are CO2 emissions? How do you measure them? I think this is a topic that is key for sure. Not the only one, but an important one for a lot of companies. I'm sure this is the same experience you have as a sustainability consultant, right?
Right. Absolutely right. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I want to pedal back a little before we wrap this up. What, in your opinion, what would you say is the most difficult aspect of sustainability to measure, especially from the organizations you've worked with? What would you say is that data point that organizations really struggle to put together or measure?
So I think there are many different points that are hard to measure. But
Mm-hmm.
if you look into, for instance, carbon accounting,
Right.
one type of data which is very hard to measure is scope 3 emissions. So
100.
the indirect emissions of a company through their supply chain. And I think this is especially difficult because you need to collect data from so many different parties.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or, for instance, if you look into waste, that's also very hard to measure. You don't necessarily have the data for it. I think that's also something that is very difficult to measure. So I would say scope 3 emissions, definitely. This is something that we see a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and that we try to also facilitate on our software to make it easier to interact with your partners on the software so that you don't need to send them multiple reminders asking them to give you the data. I
Mm-hmm.
think this one is definitely a challenge, as your suppliers may not need to comply. They may not be as aware as you are about
Mm-hmm.
why this is important.
It's
And
important. Yeah.
often quality of the data is also not good enough for you, and they're not willing to give you the data, or they don't
Mm-hmm.
have anybody this time to give you this data. So that's scope 3 emissions is definitely, I would say, one of the most challenging type of data to collect.
100% agree with you, Nina. From my experience, when you're having difficulty collecting data from a client, they most likely do not have it. I was in a
Yeah.
tussle last week with the client and give me this data, this, why are you asking me this, why are you asking me that? They don't have it most times. And like you said, when they do have it, sometimes the data is not exactly up to par. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into sustainability in the aspect of measuring data collection, reporting, and I am excited
Mhm.
about the work you guys are doing at Brightest. Hopefully, not that I know of, but currently, I don't know that there's any sustainability reporting software in Nigeria, except
Mhm.
I'm not fully aware or I'm missing something. So I would also like to see a widespread adoption of the solution you guys are building at Brightest, because it will save us consultants a lot of work, just trying to trying to collect this, collect that. So it would be great to see some expansion into these parts of the world. Nina, please help us work on that.
Let's work on that together. I'm very
Yeah,
happy to.
sure. We can. Awesome. Okay, so aside from solving sustainability issues, trying to save the planet, what else do you do for fun, Nina?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I think keeping having good mental health is super
Mm,
important. As when you have a lot of responsibilities, you have to manage people. Of course, you will have pressure, stress. So I try to keep a good balance.
yeah.
So I do yoga every day,
Mm,
every morning,
love that.
meditation, sports, dancing. So I try to find a good balance and really set boundaries. Also, meeting
Mm,
with my friends, taking time off in the weekend.
yes,
I
I
don't
can
always do this,
testify.
but yeah, I try my best to yeah to make some time for myself, for the people I love. I think that's extremely important, to find
Mm.
a good balance. So I think that definitely, yeah, sports and having good time with your family, your friends is extremely important.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today, Nina. It's been an absolute
Of
pleasure
course.
hearing from you, picking your brain on sustainability reporting. Hopefully, in the next year, we could have you come on again. Just because the landscape really, like the topic says, is really evolving and at a
Mhm.
very fast pace as well. So it would be good to hear from you more often on what's going on in the regulatory space, especially in the Europes. Most of the guests we have on here are from different parts of Africa, so it's good to hear a
Mhm.
fresh perspective, especially from the global north. So thank you so much, thank you, and you guys go watch the episode. Follow Nina. Nina, where can we find you? In case someone has listened to this and said, "Oh, I like where her head is at. I need to find more," or
Yeah.
even reach out to her.
So you can follow my LinkedIn account where I post a lot of content about sustainability. So Nina
Yes.
Benoit on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And I also have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter
Really?
in which I post and I interview people as well. So
Yay!
uh, that's uh, that's great to be on the other side.
Yeah.
So I have weekly, not always interviews, but a mix of tips on how to minimize your impact,
Mm,
updates on sustainability, interviews with sustainability leaders, tips on
mm,
how to get a job in sustainability. So
mm.
really a wide range of information. So you can find this newsletter on Substack. It's called This Week in Sustainability.
Love that. I'm going to go check that out and subscribe as well. Thank you so much. I know for a fact that you're
Yeah.
very active on LinkedIn and you're always dropping tips. Maybe next time we'll have you come speak about how to get into the sustainability field, because a lot of people pivoting into this space are coming from different areas. So it'd be great to hear your perspective
Mhm.
on that. But for now, thank you so much, Nina. I appreciate taking the time to do this with us. Um, Thank you
Thank you,
guys for
Gata.
watching. If you stayed this far, that means you really enjoyed the episode. So thank you so much. Do subscribe, like, and leave a comment, and we'll be very glad to hear from you. Until next time, stay green and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Gata.
Bye.
Bye.
Speak soon, Nina.
Speak soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Sustainability Matters. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, new videos premiere on our YouTube channel every Wednesday. Follow us across our social media pages to stay updated on the great content we have for you. Until next time, stay green and stay inspired.